All right, Tanya Summary Shiur, week 9. We're doing Prakim Chaf Gimel, Chaf Dalid. Without any further ado, let's jump in. At the beginning of Parak Gimel, we're coming from Parak Beis, and we've been discussing a concept of how Hashem gives vitality to everything in the universe, and how that's structured, how that flows. And so the Alter Rebbe says in Prakim Chaf Gimel and Chaf Dalid, before getting back to the main point, he goes off a little bit on a tangent, and he says, with everything that we've been discussing thus far, we can understand properly what it says in the Zohar, that the Torah and mitzvahs correspond to the limbs and tendons or veins of Hashem, which is, really a puzzling kind of statement, and it also, obviously Hashem is incorporeal, so it begs the question, what exactly does this mean? So the Alter Rebbe explains that Hashem is very much expressed in his will, the same way that everyone, their soul, is expressed in their will. The Alter Rebbe says the proof of this, and an example of this, not necessarily a proof per se, but something in which this is clearly demonstrated, is that when a person wants to contemplate something, they have to sit down, maybe have a little bit of meditative music or something going on in the background, and really find a calm space until finally they can try to tease out the idea in their mind. But when a person wants to do something, they have just a desire, I want to move my hand, their hand just moves. And it's not a whole calculation, it's not a whole system where it needs to go from one level to another level and try to calm down. No, you just move the hand. That's what happens. Because a person's will is something which is expressed immediately because of how close it is to the soul. It's a pure expression of the soul. There's no convolution to it. It's just what it is. So when Hashem tells us to do a mitzvah, he's expressing his will in the mitzvah. That's what it means, that he's telling us to do something, which is his will. And then when we go ahead and we're able to do what it is that Hashem told us to do, then we are becoming the matter in which Hashem's will is invested. When we give tzedakah, we are the hands of Hashem giving tzedakah. When we go to do a mitzvah, the legs that are our legs are really like Hashem's legs that are going to do the mitzvah, because we're becoming a vessel, we're expressing Hashem's will. The Alter Rebbe says this is why we say about the Avis that ha'avis hein hamarkava. The Avis are a chariot for Hashem, and this means that every one of their limbs was always nullified to Hashem's will. They were constantly trying to do whatever it is that Hashem wanted, in the same way that a chariot is nullified to the rider, that the rider is in control of the reins and makes the chariot go wherever the rider so desires. This is how the Avis were, and this is how we are. Whenever we do a mitzvah, we are the chariot for Hashem. We are expressing Hashem's will. Now this is all well and good, and it's 100% true about mitzvahs, but Torah has an advantage which is even greater than that. When a person knows Torah, when a person thinks Torah, when a person learns Torah, there's an aspect of a mitzvah to it, that when they move their lips, that in itself is an action of a mitzvah, and that has the same aspect that we discussed before, that they're expressing Hashem's will in their action. However, in regards to knowing Torah, the concept of Yediyas Torah, the concept of thinking about Torah, so this accomplishes something so much deeper, which is that even though the person is becoming a vessel for Hashem in the world, but their actual thought is the same thought as Hashem. Hashem decided that this should be mutter, or this should be asr, and this should be tar, or this should be tameh, and a person is thinking along those same lines. They might not appreciate the full depth because Torah is infinite, but ultimately the sum of the matter is that it's really the person's essence is invested in thinking this. That's what the person's essence is actively doing. They're thinking Hashem's Torah, they're thinking Hashem's wisdom. So it expresses godliness in such a pure way, in a way that other mitzvahs can't. Because other mitzvahs, yes, it's really Hashem's will invested in the world, but Torah is the thing with which Hashem created the world. It's on top of everything. That's why the Alter Rebbe explains the halacha and Shulchan Aruch, that if a person is constantly learning that Torah is their living, this is just what they do all the time, all day, every day, then they're even patur from davening. Even though davening is asking for Hashem to give hashpos into the world and to supply everyone and everything, davening is amazing and it's a very big mitzvah. But learning Torah, when a person learns Torah, they have that accomplishment on their own, because Torah is the means with which Hashem creates the world. The Alter Rebbe says the reason why a person has a mitzvah of davening irrespective of learning Torah. Why didn't you say instead of learning Torah, instead of davening, just learn a little bit extra? The reason why the Alter Rebbe says is because once a person is taking a break, the Chachamim then gave them an obligation to daven. The Alter Rebbe says that with this a person can draw down a very high level of yira upon themselves when they're learning, because a person can appreciate that everything in the world is created with Torah, and everything is bottled to even one detail in Torah. That's how lofty Torah is. So a person could think, I have the opportunity that I could think Hashem's Torah, that I could learn Hashem's Torah, and my mind is literally having the same thought as Hashem that Hashem uses to create the world. So with this, a person could draw down a very great level of awe. It's, the magnitude of this thing is standing right in front of me, and it's something that I'm appreciating tangibly in my mind, if you can say tangibly in the mind. So the Alter Rebbe says that this level of yira is a very high level of yira. About this level of yira, it says in the Mishnah, Im ein chachma in yira, because even though there's a lower level of yira, about which it says in yira ein chachma, but this level of yira is only able to be achieved through appreciating Hashem's chachma and through contemplating it. The Alter Rebbe says that if a person isn't able to achieve this level of yira because of their level, not everyone is able to. Nevertheless, it's not ma'akev of their avodah. But this level is taka, a high level of yira. So that concludes chapter 23, which we've been discussing the positive side of things, the mitzvahs of activity, the mitzvah of Torah, which is something that we sit and we do. Now in chapter 24, the Alter Rebbe discusses the flip side of things, the mitzvahs loisaseh, the things which we're told not to do. So in the same way that a person can be a chariot, a person could be a vessel for Hashem's will when they do mitzvahs, in the same way a person could be the opposite of that, chas v'shalom, with the 365 mitzvahs loisaseh. So the Alter Rebbe explains, when a person does an avera, chas v'shalom, they're becoming, in a sense, worse than klipa, worse than, which we said is like the absence of Hashem's will. And the reason why is very interesting. He says, klipa is actually striving very much to do exactly what Hashem wants. Like Bilam said, that I'm not able to do anything unless Hashem wants it for me. Now, the explanation of this is that klipa is really coming to serve Hashem. Klipa is really to do what Hashem wants, that there should be the notion of something which receives externally, the notion of something which isn't part of the divine plan that exists in the world. Hashem wants to have in his grand divine plan, he wants to have the idea of something which isn't a part of that. He wants to have the idea of something which isn't the center point. Now, klipa serves to fill this purpose. This is what klipa is. It's the idea of something which is going against Hashem per se. The thing is that klipa, when klipa does what klipa does, when klipa is that anti, that's exactly what Hashem wants from it. It's perfectly playing the role of the antagonist that Hashem wants and needs in the world. This is not the case when you have a person that does an avera. When a person does an avera, the person is really invested in whatever it is that they want to do. They're not doing it because they want to be that Rasha that Hashem created, an idea of a Rasha, and the person thinks, I'm going to be that Rasha. It's not what goes to a person's mind when they do an avera. What an avera is, the essence of an avera is that I'm doing it because I want it, and notwithstanding the consequences. Now, really, a person can't look at these facts point blank and say that I'm going to do an avera even though it really separates me from Hashem. There's always going to be something that stands in the way when a person does an avera. There's going to be the spirit of folly. Either they're not going to be thinking about it, or it's going to be the idea that really it's not going to separate me from Hashem. Or maybe the point is going to be that Hashem doesn't exist, chas v'shalom, whatever it is that might get into a person's head, which will enable them to do the avera. But ultimately, a person can't really look head on and say, I am going to do an avera even though I fully appreciate what Hashem is, I fully appreciate the effects of an avera, and nevertheless I'm going to do it. It's just not something that people do. So it turns out that a person, when they do an avera, they're actually worse than a klipa. This is why the Chachamim said, Yatush Kadmach, that humans are worse than a gnat, which is a kind of bug that when it bites, it only takes in and it doesn't give anything out, which is, in a sense, the lowest level of a klipa that there could be. Because Kedusha is the idea of trying to supply the world. It's trying to give hashpais, trying to pass things forward. And this gnat is not doing that, so it represents the idea of a klipa, which is at the bottom rung, the thing which only exists to receive and not to pass anything forward. Nevertheless, a person that does an avera is worse than that, because at least that lowest level it's there to be the lowest level, and it's doing a good job at what it was created to do. But this person, they can be so much more, and they're lowering themselves to a level in which they're actually being like the klipa, that they're trying to be separate or distinct from Hashem, maybe not actively, maybe not consciously, but that ultimately this is what they're doing, that they're becoming a chariot, in the same way that when a person does a mitzvah, they become a chariot for godliness, they're becoming a chariot for the opposite of Hashem's will, chas v'shalom. The Alter Rebbe discusses a bit about how in Avera, how inherent is in Avera, and let's say being Mechal Shabbos to save a person's life is actually a good thing, because the same Torah that said to keep Shabbos is the same Torah that said to be Mechal Shabbos if it means saving someone's life, because Pekuach Nefesh pushes it away. The Alter Rebbe elaborates on that point for a little bit. See there, it's very interesting, but not something necessarily for a summary. And the Alter Rebbe concludes by saying that with this we can appreciate the real galus hashchina that happens when a person does an avera, that their neshama exists in the person as a part of Hashem sent down into the world, and then when a person does an avera, chas v'shalom, they're causing that now the neshama is invested in something which is going against the entirety of what it is, that now it's becoming a vessel for doing the opposite of what Hashem wants in the world, which is one of the furthest places you could imagine Hashem possibly going. So this is the concept of galus shchina, and this is in a sense going back to what we finished discussing at the end of Parak Chaf Beis, and this is going to bring us back, Yimres Hashem, to the concept of Kikari V'Lacha Davar Ma'id, what that means, which we're going to get into Yimres Hashem in Parak Chaf Hey, because it's concluded Parak Chaf Daled, and next week, or should I say this week, Yimres Hashem, we're going to discuss the concept of Kikari V'Lacha and how that applies in Aveda a little bit.